Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm massively honored to present this lesson on Malcolm X. He's a true hero and a personal role model of mine, and today we're going to be learning about what he did in his life, what he accomplished, and how he went from gangster to preacher. Born May 19th, 1925 in Omaha, Nebraska. His parents, Louise and Earl Little. Earl was a Baptist minister, his mother was a teacher, and they were both followers of Marcus Garvey, somebody who preached segregation, somebody who said black people should support themselves, think highly about themselves. That got them in trouble. The house was burnt down by the Ku Klux Klan. Now, history say two different things about how Earl Little actually passed away. Some say streetcar accident, others say he was murdered, left on a train track for a train to run over him, beaten up. That caused a nervous breakdown to his mother, who moved into a mental institute. Malcolm unfortunately went into orphanage. In 8th grade, Malcolm was asked what he wanted to be in life. He said a lawyer. His teacher replied that Negroes should be more realistic and become a carpenter. And this really hurt Malcolm. Malcolm became a gangster after that. Yeah. At the age of 19, he moved to Harlem, where he wore suits, and he was a pimp. He was pimping white women, he was selling drugs, you can name everything. He was doing it. He was robbing houses with his mate Shorty. I've been reading the story of what he used to do. Absolutely crazy. He really went through a very crazy patch here in Harlem. He was tall, he was slick, he had red hair. Now I have some questions for you, okay? So pause the video, have a go if you can answer them. When was Malcolm X born? How old was Malcolm X when he moved to Harlem? Why did Malcolm X leave school? And why did Malcolm X go to jail? So again, I'll let you pause the video and see if you can answer them questions. When was he born? 1925. How old was Malcolm when he moved to Harlem? Around 19. Why did Malcolm X leave school? Because he was told being a lawyer is not realistic for a Negro. Why did Malcolm X go to jail? He was robbing houses, he was pimping white women, and if you pimp white women at that time, you'd get in even more trouble. If you were a black person around white women, you were in deep trouble. Now, when he went to jail, he went to Charleston jail, he went to Charleston prison. In prison, he went through a massive turnaround. It was loads of letters from his brothers and sisters in Detroit to become Muslim and follow the Nation of Islam, who their leader was Malcolm, who was Elijah Muhammad. And Malcolm X changed his name from Malcolm Little to Malcolm X, and he really changed his entire life here in prison. Stayed in Charlestown prison for 2 years and became a member of the Nation of Islam, and really was taught that black people had a religion called the Nation of Islam. That was their salvation, and to forget about these white devils, these white people. And Malcolm grew into it. He really did grow into it. He was like, okay, that's fine. This is what I'm going to follow. Now, in prison, Malcolm had a massive role model in the name of Bimby. Was one of the first ever, to command total respect with his words. And this is the first role model Malcolm X had. And this was in Charlestown prison. He met Bimby. He was also red-haired like him. He had freckles, and he was somebody who was knowledgeable. He was intelligent, and he told Malcolm, if you want to become something, use that brain for something instead of selling drugs where you used to, smoking and pimping and all that stuff. Then he goes to Shorty, listen, let's leave jail clever. And that's exactly what he did. With the help of his sister, he actually got a transfer to Norfolk prison in Massachusetts. This is where his life completely changed. Norfolk was like heaven compared to Charlestown. Instead of bars, there were walls. It was a lot better. There was 1,200 inmates. Each inmate had his own room. It was completely different. And their library, invented and paid by a millionaire called Parkhurst, really made him study. He studied so much. He read all sorts of books. He read on genetics, biology, physiology, sociology. You've got to remember, this is a man who completely revolutionized his life. It was really hard for him at first, okay, but he loved to read. Malcolm X really changed his life. And following the Nation of Islam, he didn't have any pork, he stopped smoking, they would call him Satan before he converted, because he was he was a massive anti kind of religious kind of guy. He would diss God, he would diss the Bible. But look at the massive change. Now 58 minutes. When he was in Norfolk, 10 o'clock, lights out, there was no, that's it, you couldn't read. But he used to get light reflecting from the corridor. He would sit on the floor, and every 58 minutes he'd pretend to go sleep, like he'd read and then pretend to go sleep and then wake up, and he only needed 3 or 4 hours of sleep. That was enough for him. So he would study all night almost. What a man this guy was, you know, using the light of the corridor to study during night because lights out at 10 o'clock. Just shows you the dedication of this man. These are some of the quotes. Sometimes the people with the worst past create the best future. That was Hazrat Umar bin Khattab, one of the friends of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Prophet Muhammad. I could spend the rest of my life reading. This is the man he was, you know, he really put, and also he was very, he understood how to speak. He was a master of rhetoric. What I mean by rhetoric, he knew how to deliver his speech. If you had $2 in your pocket, you'd give it to him happily. That's rhetoric. He knew how to speak. This man was a genius. He was articulate. He memorized the entire dictionary. This is a genius inbound and was a genius in prison. He stayed in prison 6.5 years. After that, he moved to Detroit with his brother, and he became a minister for the Nation of Islam. Elijah Muhammad loved him and actually told him to stay in Harlem for 10 years and also Philadelphia and stuff like that to establish temples. And he became an amazing speaker. He was one of the best speakers I've ever seen, I've ever heard. You talk about speaking, you talk Malcolm. Now Elijah Muhammad convinced Malcolm to get married, you know, to help the Nation of Islam, having kids. In 1958, he got married to Betty. And, you know, I love this one. You know, he says he ever railed against white racism, saying such things as, "We didn't land on Plymouth Rock, my brothers and sisters. Plymouth Rock landed on us." You know, he was amazing. The way he spoke, I mean, the numbers of the Nation of Islam massively climbed because this guy was a fantastic speaker. You listen to him today and you're just blown away. This is a man who stood up for his people. And the white people, he believed them to be devils. He believed them to be really satanic. But then things did change later on, and we're going to see what happened. Now, what a man, by the way, because you got to remember, white people had a significant effect on Malcolm. They killed his parents, apparently. They lynched his 4 uncles. So really, he grew up hating these white people. Now, Malcolm X's relationship with Elijah Muhammad soured massively when he found out from his son Wallace Muhammad that Elijah Muhammad had 8 illegitimate children. Okay, with his kind of personal assistants, which was crazy. And also that really did further on get even worse in 1963 when Elijah Muhammad suspended him for his comments on John F. Kennedy. But then in 1964 things changed. With some financial help from Ella, his sister, Malcolm went to pilgrimage. But this is where Malcolm really changed. He was like, wow. He went and he saw different people reading namaz with him, reading to God in pilgrimage. There were people you'd consider to be white, eating from the same plate, reading together. This is when he said, no, white people are not all satanic. They are not all devils. There's something wrong here. And then he started to follow the mainstream Islam. When he came back, his relationship with Martin Luther King went better because originally he didn't like the way Martin taught integration without physical combat or anything along them lines. He goes, that ain't gonna work. He ain't gonna work. What Malcolm was all about was getting segregation. He was all about having his own kind of area, but then he realized that ain't it. In 3 months, this great man made 3 million people Muslim. This is a real Islamic hero, a hero for somebody who fought against injustice. And in 1965, unfortunately, he was shot and killed in the Audubon Ballroom. And one of the greatest people that lived in the 21st century, you know, of the night, you know, not from since now for a very long time. I think this is one of the greatest people you're gonna read upon. One of the greatest talkers, preachers. He had a way with words. He was an unbelievable man. And when he was killed, actually, there was 3 people. One of them got shot in the leg and was captured. The other 2 escaped, and they didn't go to jail. to wrongly accuse people when they jail with this man, which is crazy really, and security was really low. And by the way, this man was followed by the FBI and CIA because of his influence that he was having. What a man that he was, the way he commanded respect with his words, kind of like Bimby, taking it to another level, educating himself from being a gangster to a preacher. This is a man who had many lives in one, and at the tender age of 39, he passed away. I wanted to make this lesson to teach people who this man was. What a man. And last thing, if you could answer these questions, that'd be amazing. When did Malcolm X die? When did Malcolm X split from Elijah Muhammad? How did pilgrimage change Malcolm X? These are the final questions I want to ask, and hopefully you've learned something in this lesson. Thank you very much for attending this lesson on the one and only Malcolm X. I want to give a massive shout out to Jawad Amin and Shabir Yassin, who were people who influenced me into reading about Malcolm X. And Malcolm X just blew me away, because listen, this man was an addict, he was a druggie, he did all these things, but he gave away pork, he gave away cigarettes, he gave away a lot of his life to be a great man. Thank you.